Today's lesson is lesson 2-4 and lesson 2-5. So we're going to talk about absolute value and we're going to solve problems with absolute value. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to watch a brain pop video about absolute value. And it's only going to take less than 2 minutes.
Dear Tim and Book, why is 5 the absolute value of -5? From Milo. To talk about absolute value, you need to know about positive and negative integers. A positive integer has a value that's greater than 0. That ceiling above us is 3 meters high. If we assume that our starting or 0 point is the floor, then the word above indicates a positive 3 meters. A negative integer has a value that's less than 0. Moby doesn't know this, but there's actually a pot of gold buried 3 meters below the house. The pot of gold is below us. That indicates a negative number. So positive 3 and negative 3, they have the same absolute value. Yes, they do. Absolute value is a measure of a number's distance from 0 on the number line. Even though they have different values, 3 and negative 3 are both 3 units away from 0. The absolute value of 3 is 3, and the absolute value of negative 3 is also 3. Okay, let's get back to hanging these pictures. Moby? I guess he didn't know I was kidding about that pot of gold.
So what does a negative sign mean when it is outside of the parentheses? So here we have a negative on the outside of the parentheses. Inside the parentheses, we have a positive 3, right? So what do you think that negative means? So the number inside the parentheses is a positive 3. But we want the negative of that. So when I write my answer, what am I going to write? So we're going to say the answer is negative 3. So what do you think, one more time, does that negative on the outside of the parentheses mean compared to what's inside the parentheses? All right, so yeah, the negative means the opposite of the number inside the parentheses. So this means the opposite of positive 3, and of course the opposite of positive 3 is negative 3. So here's the next question. Which is greater, 2 or the negative 2? All right, so it's not, neither of them are greater. They are equal because remember, this is a positive 2. Does everybody see that? This is a positive 2. Now, this one over here is a positive 2. This one over here says, remember, we said that, what does the negative on the outside of parentheses mean? The opposite, right? So here, this is the opposite of negative 2. What's the opposite of negative 2? 2. Very good. So this is a positive 2, so those are equal. All right, so here we have a number line. You don't have to write the number line. But it says integers are opposites when they are the same distance from 0 on the number line in opposite directions. So here we're talking about the 2 and the negative 2, the 2, positive 2 and the negative 2. They are how many jumps to get to the positive 2?
2.
2. And how many jumps to get to the negative 2? 2. Listen to my question. I said how many jumps? Can you say negative 2 jumps? No, it's just 2 jumps, right? So, are they the same distance away from 0 on the number line? Yes. So, because it takes 2 jumps to get this way, 2 jumps to get this way, negative 2 and positive 2 are opposites. So, what's the opposite of negative 8? 8. Positive. What's the opposite of negative 50? Positive 50. What's the opposite of 3.5?
Negative.
Negative 3.5. Very good. What is the opposite of positive 4.62? Very good. Negative 4.62. So, the opposites, it works for integers, it works for whole numbers, and it works for rational numbers. Okay? So here we want to find negative 5. So again, this means the opposite of negative 5. And the opposite of negative 5 is positive 5. Is everybody clear with that? All right. So write down those examples. All right. So for letter B, we want to find the negative of negative 21. So this means the opposite of negative 21. So the opposite of negative 21, of course, is positive 21. Okay? So for letter C, we want the opposite of positive 4, which is going to be negative 4. Very good. So for example 2, we want to find absolute value of integers. Numbers that are opposites are the same distance from 0 on the number line. We already talked about that. Opposites have the same absolute value. So absolute value of a number is the distance between the number and 0 on the number line. Make sure you write down that definition. Make sure you write down that definition. The symbols for absolute value are these lines right here. Okay? Those are the symbols for absolute value. So, if I have, let me write down an example. If we want to know what is the absolute value of negative 4, that's going to be equal to 4, because it takes 4 jumps to get to 0. Is everybody clear? If I have the absolute value of 3, that's going to be not negative 3. I didn't ask for the opposite. It's going to be positive 3, because how many jumps does it take to get to 0? 3 jumps. Okay? So, what you need to remember is that the absolute value is always positive. Is everybody clear with that? What if I had a negative on the outside of the absolute value? So for example, what if I had a negative out here, negative absolute value of negative 6? The absolute value symbol is also a grouping symbol. That is a grouping symbol. So when we are working with grouping symbols, and we're trying to simplify, do you guys remember PEMDAS? Remember we changed it to GEMDAS? Okay, so the G stands for grouping symbols. Okay, so that means that we're going to do the absolute value of negative 6 first. Is everybody with me? So what is the absolute value of negative 6? Positive 6, right? So we want the negative of the positive 6, which makes that, what's the opposite of positive 6? Negative 6. All right, so this is example 2A. We want to find the absolute value of negative 6. So again, we want to ask ourselves, what is the distance, or how many jumps do we need to take to get to 0 from negative 6? So here here's the negative 6. So we're jumping 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 jumps. Does everybody see that? So the absolute value of negative 6 is 6. How about Letter B, what's the absolute value of 12? Not negative 12, 12. We don't want the opposite of 12. We want the absolute value of 12. So we're going to ask ourselves, how many jumps does it take to get from 12 to 0? 12. You see? So how about letter C? We want the absolute value of negative 23. Very good. That's 23. All right, so example 3 is find the absolute value of integers and rational numbers. So for the first one, it says a cave explorer started at sea level and descended in a cave. Her location can be represented by negative 150 feet. How many feet did the explorer travel? Now, so what's the important information we're going to write down? So her location is at a negative 150 feet. That's the location. And we want to know how many feet did the cave explorer travel. So when I say how many feet, you guys, aren't we looking for a distance? And distance is always what? Positive. Always positive. So if I'm looking for a distance that's always positive, what is that math word that we're looking for? We're looking for the absolute value. So we want the absolute value of negative 150, which is going to be equal to? Very good. That's going to be 150 feet. So, Nixie dropped a coin in a wishing well. The top of the well can be represented by 0 feet. The location of the coin can be represented by negative 32.75 feet. How many feet did the coin fall? Okay, so the important information that we're going to highlight here is what? So she dropped the coin, and that is represented by 32.75 feet. Okay, and the question is, how many feet? So again, we're looking for a distance. So how many feet did the coin fall? 32.75 feet. And the way we write that is with our absolute value. So we're going to write the absolute value of negative 32.75. That's going to be equal to a positive 32.75 feet.